Hello and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we cover everything on the table in the world of sports. And we are back with more college football content because the national championship is right around the corner. Monday, January 10th in Indianapolis, Indiana, at Lucas Oil Stadium, an SEC championship rematch between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, both of these teams won their respective semifinals to get here. We did an episode covering that. You can watch that. That'll be up around here. But, Tim, you ready to run it?
Let's run it.
All right. So this game is a rematch of the SEC championship game in which Alabama came and upset, at the time, top-ranked Georgia 41-24. Now, at the time, Georgia was completely undefeated. They were dominating every team in their path, but Alabama seemed to figure them out. Now they meet again in the national championship game, and it's going to be interesting to see how these teams adjust. And that's going to be the main thing to watch for me, how these teams change their game plan from the SEC championship game, because it's such an advantage when on both sides, when you've seen another team before. So how are you going to respond to that? You know, Alabama seemed like the only team that was really able to figure out Georgia's defense because they hadn't given up more than 17 points in a game, and Alabama hung 41 on them. And it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia's defense adjusts to Bryce Young and that offense. So from an adjustment standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see what these two teams do.
Absolutely. Pointing out to what you're talking about with Bryce Young and Alabama and how they really seem to figure out Georgia's defense. And in that SEC championship game, Bryce Young torched them for 421 yards and 4 total touchdowns, which no quarterback had done anything like that to Georgia's defense all season long. And I think one of the biggest things that Georgia is going to need to focus on is keeping Bryce Young in the pocket, getting some of that outside pressure and not allowing him to escape and extend plays. That's one of the things that I think he did particularly well against them, and just led to more and more opportunities. And you saw Cincinnati actually being able to do some of that themselves. Just despite them putting up the points that they did, he only had 181 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception against Cincinnati. So you can see with some of the veteran presence that Cincinnati had on defense, they were able to slow him down a little bit. So Georgia could definitely look back and learn a few things from them and see what they want to try to implement with their guys heading into this game.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing that you bring up. And one of the things I have in the key matchups is Bama's wide receivers versus that Georgia secondary, because we know the front seven of Georgia, how talented they are. They were all over the place in the Orange Bowl against Michigan. They're going to have a fine time putting pressure on Bryce Young. Just can this Georgia secondary, led by Darion Kendrick, keep up with Jamison Williams, Ja'Cory Brooks, Slade Bolden, the wide receivers that Alabama has on the outside? Because Bryce Young is that dude. He won the Heisman for a reason. Even if there is pressure on him, he's going to find a way to slip out. Sometimes you can't keep him totally contained, not a talent like that. And will the Georgia defense keep that locked down? And that'll remain to be seen.
Yeah, like you were saying, even without John Mechie III for Alabama, they've got playmakers. And one of the things that will, I think, be a key point in the game, like you said with Georgia's defensive line, Alabama's offensive line on the counterpart of that actually did struggle a little bit, despite doing very well for the Alabama's run game in that Cincinnati semifinal game. They did actually kind of struggle with some of the pass blocking there. They allowed 2 sacks and 4 quarterback hurries against a Cincinnati D line that, granted, was probably pretty good, but really doesn't match up.
I mean, they're all right.
Georgia. Yeah,
Cincinnati's defense, their front seven isn't bad by any means.
No, but Georgia, once again, it's not Georgia.
Yeah, but Georgia is stacking dogs all across that front seven like we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Jordan Davis won the Outland and the Bednarik. Linebacker Nakobe Dean, he's looked at as a top prospect. Also, he won the Dick Butkus Award for the best linebacker. And also on that defensive line, you got guys like Devontae Wyatt, Jalen Carter. That'll make life miserable.
Yeah.
I think Bryce Young should be pretty fortunate that he has Evan Neal protecting his blind side, because Evan Neal is really that bright spot in the Alabama Crimson Tide offensive line. But that's going to be a battle that Alabama's going to have to adjust to for sure. I completely agree.
Yeah, because they definitely obviously showed enough in that first win, the SEC championship, to be able to give Bryce Young enough time to really dot up Georgia's defense. But with them starting to look a little bit shaky in that pass game, is what Alabama offensive line is going to come to play, because that'll make a big difference in at least that side of the game, Alabama's offense versus Georgia's defense. The other side of the ball actually poses to be really interesting as well, because you saw a very, very solid game out of Stetson Bennett against Michigan. And will he be able
that's
to continue
a really good segue
to step
because
up?
I wanted to also talk about Stetson Bennett and how not only he played in the SEC championship game, but how he played in the Orange Bowl. This is kind of Stetson Bennett's redemption arc. He was a walk-on that was not really the guy at the beginning of the season. It was him and JT Daniels. He didn't know who was going to start coming into the playoffs. Stetson Bennett was declared the guy, and he put on a show in the Orange Bowl, winning offensive MVP, and for good reason. Now, and Stetson Bennett knows this. He even said it himself that he needs to play better against Alabama than what he showed in the SEC championship game. He said it himself. He thought he just played all right, and he put up 340 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. But how his mindset has adjusted and how he's going to change his game coming off of such a marvelous performance in the Orange Bowl will really be key on how he leads this Georgia offense against the Alabama defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very good to see some of that awareness, where it's like he did not necessarily have a bad game by any means. He put up like those 21 points or whatnot, but when you know what you're up against in that Alabama offense is when you're trying to outperform those guys like Bryce Young and the weapons that he has, you got to be on the top of your game, where all right just isn't good enough. All right doesn't win national championships, and all right has not been what has got Alabama back to the national championship year in and year out.
Yeah. All right doesn't win the national championship. Great wins the national championship game. And
he's got to be great.
Both of these two teams have a lot of great in them on both sides of the ball. Can Stetson Bennett rise to the occasion is the question he'll be looking to answer.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I really want to cover for all of you sports bettors out there is the spread in this game, because I think it's really, really interesting. When the matchup was set, the line opened as Georgia being 3-point favorites. It's really interesting to look at because Alabama being an underdog doesn't exactly go well for the other team. I mean, they've only been an underdog twice since 2010 in the last 11-12 seasons, and both times have come against the Georgia Bulldogs. And one of the times was the SEC championship game where they were 6.5-point underdogs and Bama absolutely routed them.
Yep.
So, and the line has moved from Georgia -3 to Georgia -2.5. Money's coming in on the Crimson Tide, and it makes sense because you don't really bet against Nick Saban, especially
it's real
in
hard
national
to.
championship games. But you know, he's been there time and time again. I feel like that's just a really interesting aspect of how Vegas sees it.
Yeah, it's never good for the opposing team to give Alabama another reason to come to play, because obviously Alabama then with that SEC championship game kind of stood firm and proved who they were, reminded them reminded everybody why they were number one for so long. Obviously not throughout the course of the regular season, but it'll be interesting to see is who has the bigger chip, because you had Alabama coming and making that statement win over Georgia, the SEC championship game. Georgia absolutely has their redemption arc coming of trying to prove of who they are and why they deserve to be here. But then again, now you have coming into this game with the spread is the belief is still in Georgia, decent amount in with a lot of the betters. So now Alabama's here to prove, okay, we're going to prove to you that that one wasn't a fluke and we can still have that dominance over them. So it's like, it's going to be really interesting to see what version of both teams come out, because it can go a multitude of different ways, and it's
It's
all
just a
about
heavyweight
different
matchup.
aspects.
It
Absolutely.
quite literally is the heavyweight championship fight of the world. And
Yeah.
I can't wait to watch this game on Monday. It's going to be an absolute battle. Now, with that being said, Tim, I think it's about time where we make some predictions as to what is going to happen in the game. And I know we just talked about the spread, but we're not picking against the spread here. Like our NFL predictions video, we are going to be picking outright. And Tim, I'm going to open with you first. Who do you have winning the national championship game?
It's really tough for me because I know, like, you know what kind of defense Georgia has, you know what kind of offense Alabama has. You really go back and forth of who wins that battle. I think the winner of that battle particularly wins the game, because there's so much firepower on both sides of the ball when those two sides are out on the field. And to me, with everything that I've looked at and considered, I gotta give this one to Georgia. I feel like they're going to have a real good adjustment given what I saw, the game planning that they had against Michigan, where they really made it their game. They forced Michigan to play their game. Obviously, it's really hard to have that kind of success against an Alabama team that's coached by arguably the greatest college. It's not even really arguably the greatest college coach of all time in Nick Saban. But I think with the arc that we've seen Stetson Bennett on, with the improvement and his desire to come out with a better game, I just got to give Georgia the edge here. And I think it's going to be a real close one, but either anywhere between 3, 7, and 10. It all depends on different stages of the game, but I do believe the Bulldogs are going to pull this one out.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring up all of those aspects of the game. And you're right. It's tough. That's what makes this game so fun, because it could go either which way. It is very tough to predict because Alabama is Alabama. They have the experience that can't be replicated. They have the coach that can't be replicated, and they have players on both sides of the ball. But Georgia has been the number one team in the nation all season, and for good reason, because they've played like the best team in the nation all season. Both teams deserve to be here.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to have to agree with you, Tim. I'm going to pick the Georgia Bulldogs. I think that the adjustments that Kirby Smart is going to have for them will be enough to not stop, but contain, slow
You're
down.
not worried about stopping them. You just got to contain.
Slow down Alabama enough for Stetson Bennett to come in. He knows what he has to do. He's going to throw it around. He's going to do his thing. They're going to have a good game plan ready. And Kirby Smart is going to defeat his mentor. The Padawan will defeat the Jedi Master, if you so to speak. You have Georgia. I have Georgia also. But this game could really go either way. Okay. That's why they play the game. So,
yep.
Do you got any more on this game before we wrap it up?
You know, just one of the comments that you made about just containing Alabama and all of the talent that they have. You saw in a game, the one game that Alabama has dropped this season. Obviously, the one game that Georgia has dropped was against Alabama, but the one game Alabama dropped against Texas A&M, you saw they were able to contain them for a large part of the game. But even then, they sustained a heavy run late by Alabama, but it was just enough to squeak it out. And that's what it takes to win against a team like Alabama, is you're not going to, it's really hard to force them to have an off day. You might get them to have an off half or even maybe an off 3/4, but an offense like that has the ability to score in bunches and score fast. So Georgia's going to have to put up a very complete game to be able to stop this Alabama team enough to pull out a win. But I think if anybody has the defense, the knowledge, and the coaching to stop them, I think it's going to be Georgia.
These two teams are very much the two best teams in the country in college football. And this was the national championship game that we deserved. And hopefully it's going to be one of the
I
all-time
hope it
greats,
lives up
because
to it. I really hope it
that's what
does.
it's lining up to be. But until next time, we have lots of stuff coming. We're going to be recapping the national championship game. When that ends, we're going to be doing stuff for the NFL playoffs, regular season awards, when the playoff bracket is decided. And we have lots of stuff for you guys to watch, both college football, NFL, even a little bit of NHL if that's your thing. But yeah, like and subscribe for more Running the Table content. And until next time, we out.